Lunch break's over, so please grab your seats and we will move into the next part, probably the most exciting presentation we're going to have today. Maybe there'll be better stuff tomorrow, but for today, this topic is most interesting to us as lenders. And we're talking about I have a CFO and so can you. The goal here is to talk to the folks about either before they had a CFO or if they don't have one, what they're doing about that. And then the other aspect of it is what happens after they got a CFO. And when we say a CFO, the Chief Financial Officer doesn't have to be a full-time in-house one because there's a lot of fractional CFOs. We use one in our business. Johnny Bork, who's here, and he takes very good care of us on a fractional basis. And I know Nick has got a fractional CFO that happens to be here, Chad, and Chad takes good care of Nick, or is putting him together. I don't know which, but you will find out. Yeah. So with this particular group, we have Terry Bowdler up here, who's our fearless leader, and part of the reason for that is he has a keen interest in how well everybody's financials look. Go figure, huh? And then Gus, I know over the years, he has a fractional CFO. He's full-time? Ah, okay. But he doesn't live in your area. That's it, yeah. So he never knows when he's working or not. Huh? Yeah. And he's done some really great stuff for Gus, I believe, since Gus started working with him. Joe has an in-house CFO. Kevin has been with him. How long, Joe? A long time? Since we opened. And he really knows how to cook the books. So that's excellent. And then Stan has a guy that, Gary, that he just brought on not too long ago, April. And so it was Joe, I think it was said earlier in the session or when we were talking yesterday. And my wife is the controller of our company, so don't take this the wrong way. But Joe said, a controller tells you where you are today. And a CFO will tell you where you're going to be tomorrow. And so I think there's a lot to be said for that ability to forecast, challenge, lay out a plan that you can follow. And so that's my comments. Terry, what do you hope to get out of this, or what would you like to suggest about this topic?
I've had the good fortune to be self-employed for 35 years. And most of those years, I've had a right-hand person who was a CFO. The last 6 years, the CFO that I've had has been fractional. And I have to say that it works extremely well on the budget and on reality. Many of you in the room may not need a full-time person yet as a CFO, but being open-minded to a fractional could be a good alternative until you get there. In a big picture, I find a CFO helps you be much more strategic in every part of your business, not just the numbers. A CFO also helps you to get accurate, timely financial statements that are really meaningful to you. Hopefully your CFO will also help you to get a really good feel for what is your real cash flow. As many of you know, if you're in Lease Your Pay here, your financial statements don't give you the whole picture. The real picture is how much money really came in this month and how much money really went out, and that cash flow is how you really pay your bills. So how do you get there if you don't have a CFO? We feel strongly that most of our clients should eventually, if not initially, have a CFO like that. They also help you manage a lot of the risks in your business that maybe you don't have time to focus on from day to day. Insurance risks, collection risk, fraud risk, any type of risk, your CFO should be on top of that. Now, the CFOs I've had in the past and my current one did not come from the auto industry. So there was a learning curve. But if the person has a high aptitude, if if they became a CPA as a background, that's a very strong indicator of being a solid CFO. You can train them this business. The operating lease accounting is not rocket science. It's not simple, but it's not rocket science. So you can work with a non-automotive CFO to train them into this space, is what my experience has been. A good CFO can help you negotiate with your suppliers. Many of your suppliers, you as an owner, if you're like me, you develop a relationship with your suppliers. And sometimes that relationship takes a little bit of the objectivity and the willingness to negotiate out of the relationship, and that's not good. I know in the case of my CFO, Johnny, if I ask him to go in and negotiate with a vendor, he's going to do a way better job than I will, way better. And that counts big time. Also, a good CFO should be your primary resource in dealing with your funding capital source. It's not just in providing the financials, but being able to answer all the tough questions that may come up from day to day. Most of our owner dealers are not CPA type folks. They're business development folks. They're really good at running the business, selling cars, leasing cars, doing all that, but maybe they're not the best at doing financial statements and balance sheets and making sense of everything. Again, you could be way more strategic, in my opinion, if you have a CFO to help you with that. So those are just a few points. I'll pass it on to Gus.
Gus, if you do a little, explain when you got John on board with you and what you were doing before and some of the things that he's been able to help you with in the last few years.
So John came on board in 2013, and at that point we needed a CFO really bad. So and the reason why I say that is that our local, I was using a local accounting firm, and it's really one guy, a Brazilian guy that I could never understand, and he was doing our books for us for many years, but he just wasn't very good. I'd ask him a lot of questions, he could never really give me answers, and we started getting audited financials, which were required by our lender at the time. Well, actually, they still require them. And they were coming in to do the audits, and he couldn't answer a lot of the questions. So I went on a search to find a controller is really what I was looking for, not necessarily a CFO. So if you find a controller, they're cheaper than the CFOs just because one's called a controller and one's called a CFO, but a lot of times they do almost the same thing. So we were looking for a controller. He is now my CFO, and I made him a CFO so that he can have a little bit more power when he's working with the financial institutes. They will pay more attention to him if he says he's a CFO versus if he just calls and says he's a controller, even doing the same thing. So Chad's smiling over there, but it's really the same thing. I don't know. There's probably a difference, but I don't know what it is. But hiring one was a crucial thing. It did take me about 6 months to find one. I interviewed a lot of different candidates. It's very hard, but I got really lucky, and I found one that was in the industry. He was not a buy here, pay here. He was on the new car dealer side, but he did work for a group of a new car dealership group that at one time had a buy here, pay here operation, so he was familiar with it, but he was not an expert at it, and so he needed to become an expert, which he did pretty quick. He's a CPA in, I think, 3 different states. He's just the perfect guy. For a while, he did auditing for the state of Florida for their sales taxes, and he was auditing dealers, and he really hated it, which is the reason why he came to work for us. And I was able to convince him to move from Florida to beautiful Southern California. I just didn't tell him that I wasn't on the beach and that I was in Hollywood, and it wasn't San Diego, it was the high desert, Palmdale, Lancaster, where you have tumbleweeds every day flying around. And he moved out here. A couple years later, about 4 years later, his wife said, "We got to go back. I can't handle the heat and the tumbleweeds." So they moved back to Florida, and when he did that, I had two choices. Because he did have an offer to work somewhere. Either I continue him or I get rid of him. You know, we part ways. So we came up with a plan where he would reduce his wage because he was working. He wasn't going to be at the dealership all the time, and we would do it over a period of a year. And then at that time, he would become a fractional CFO as I found someone else. That never happened. He's been my full CFO since that move happened. And a lot of people say, well, does it work when you have somebody that's not at the office every day? It did for us because he was there long enough to build a strong rapport with my business staff. And I don't know about the rest of you, but my business staff, they don't churn. They're there forever. I've had them one of them I've had there for 30 years. So they just don't really turn a lot. So it was really easy to do that transition. And he gets more work done because he's not being bothered every day. The disadvantage is that I don't bother him every day. So when he was there, I would go into his office and sit down, or he'd come into my office and we'd brainstorming. So the brainstorming part of it is what I do miss from having a CFO that's not on hand. But there's a lot of the other advantages, the timely financial statements, being able to answer everything on there. And because we do both subprime and buy here, pay here combination, the cash flow is crazy. You know, one month we have a big subprime month and we get more cash to help pay our overhead. The next month it drops. All of a sudden we're short over here, but maybe we had more payments coming in, and the next month we had less payments. It's very, very difficult to control, and you really need someone to be on top of it. It also, having one of the pluses of having a CFO is that it's going to be a lot easier to find capital for you. And you might even get a better deal on capital because when you come in with the real bucks. And in our case, when they're audited, it's an even stronger position. So when we go out for a flooring or reduce something, you're on the higher list than the guy that comes in and doesn't have those things. Because the lenders come in and they don't know if you're telling the truth. They can see what you're putting in writing, but is it real? And having a CFO gives it a little bit more validity. And then if you have audited financials, that really gives it a lot more validity. But it also comes with a cost. So what does a CFO cost? Ours costs about $144,000 a year, so he's about $12,000 a month. So it's expensive. Can you find him for cheaper? When he first started with us, I think I brought him in for $10,000, and that's California wages. It's actually pretty cheap. They could be as expensive as $150,000 to $200,000 to $250,000 a year. So the kind of range goes all over the place, and I don't know what these guys are paying for theirs, but they can be expensive. A really good one is definitely well worth it, and I would highly recommend it. If you want to take there's no way you can have a $20, $30, $40 million portfolio without having one. It's just not gonna. It's just too big. If you're gonna have a $2 million portfolio, you might probably get away with it, but or a $3 million portfolio. But once you start getting into the bigger numbers, there's just no way.
Thanks. Joe, with Kevin, he started with you as a controller or something along that line and kind of grew into his position. So tell us that story a little bit, how that happened.
So when I got into the car business, Kevin worked with Dixon Hughes Goodman, or Dixon Hughes at the time, and he would come in monthly. I guess you would call it a fractional guy. He'd come in monthly, and we were on QuickBooks and Wayne Reeves back in the day, and it was real primitive and simple, and it was just a matter, he'd close out the books, and we were running it through a third party, and that was that. I didn't speak the lingo. I didn't understand it. I don't know that I'd ever spent much time. Actually, I think I took 2 weeks of accounting and dropped it in college right before the ad drop time was over. So it ultimately, and I don't have as much to say about it other than ultimately in the business, you need to focus on what you're great at. And if you're not great at it, find somebody who is. And I would have never gotten to where I am with Terry and LHPH had I not had a CFO in place who could speak the lingo. And when they start asking about pro formas and all that, I mean, I can tell you operationally probably as well as most CFOs, but it's going to be in country boy car lingo. And it has to be presented in a format with which they can then present to their banks so that it all, there's a whole different world over there that is based in balance sheet land and where numbers get manipulated to make people happy that You know, whether it works operationally or not, who knows? But they at least know how to do that and help guide you there. And then as the operator, you can make the decisions between does the tail wag the dog or vice versa. But the biggest thing is it allows you to stay organized on the back end so that you can focus most on what you know how to do, and that's the operations of the business. And in particular, we started in 2010, and we're now 2019, perhaps the greatest time to ever start in the business that there has been. We started at the bottom of the market. We're able to come through. Things have been fantastic for years and years and years. Ultimately, I've always been told by mentors over the years that when one thing goes bad, they kind of all go bad. And if you're not on top of your game going into it, you're going to be in the weeds to where you can't dig yourself out. So at the very least, I feel as with the CFO, you at least have that, assuming he's doing his job and doing it well, you at least have that part taken care of so that when things go bad, and they will at some point or another, you're going to have ups and downs. You can focus on the things that the levers you know how to pull to right the ship and keep everything moving forward, knowing that the back of the house is taken care of. And ultimately, as many sleepless nights as I've had in this business, there have been a few less because I have that part of it taken care of with the CFO.
Great. Stan, you brought on Gary in April, I think you said, and what made that happen?
Well, that's a
And hold that microphone up to your mouth.
Yes, I've got it here. That's a long story that we don't have time to tell of how we ended up where we're at. But I can tell you this, and I would suspect most of you, if you don't have an in-house CFO and stuff, that you're doing no different than what I was doing and what Joe was referencing and stuff, is you're spending too much time chasing money, watching the money, pulling up accounts, making sure there's cash in the bank, you know, and estimating where you need to be in all of this, which is completely wrong, but it's all the tools you got to work with. And we brought on in-house accountants, you know, still not getting the information we needed. We kept struggling through it. Our finance company, we were getting too large on our finance company business that's on the side and stuff, and wanting audited financials and all of this. So we were having to pay outside firms out of Baton Rouge, and those $25,000 checks that kind of wear you out pretty quick. And but we started looking at, it's just time. You know, we're probably 3-4 years late of needing an in-house CFO to do all of the things that they're talking about, you know, and free me up to do what I'm good at and not have me chasing all the money, having all the meetings that, you know,